everybody and say all Americans have the same plan, work until 59 and a half, and then you retire. So they all put the money into the 401k. And all of this generalization that everybody is preached is great for Wall Street, terrible for the individual.
Mike, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me.
For sure, man. We're excited to have you on today and dig deeper into your experience in the real estate investing world, man, right? You're over 13 years in the industry, starting from fix and flips as a firefighter, working as a broker, doing single family rentals, commercial investments, and eventually running a family office now where you currently help manage and advise high net worth individuals, right? All while learning through the School of Hard Knocks. So, man, you've been able to achieve a ton over this past decade, but kind of talk to us about your first deal and what got you started on your route to financial freedom.
Yeah, man, the first deal, it's funny as people ask, it's probably been, 13 plus years now, but that first deal was a whole year in of itself. And that's like kind of the crazy thing. I get to a point where I was doing a ton of deals, probably say 5 flips a month were going on, but that first year was just one deal from start to finish. It was a crazy experience, but I started going to college. I want to be a doctor, and really, I did enjoy the medical side of things, but I really just want to make a lot of money. And as I started down that path in college, I realized this is a very long path. At the end of it's a lot of money, but before it is, peanuts for a long time. And I took a term, they call it J term in college, like a 3-week little kind of filler thing. And it was about real estate. So that kind of sparked my interest. And it basically, I always had a dream of being a firefighter. My dad was a firefighter. So that's kind of where the passion was. And then when I took that J term in real estate, I realized, man, there's a way that I could make money that doesn't commit the next 10 years of my life. So I could be a fireman if I want, and I could do this on the side. This would probably work. So I started down that path. Kind of did it side by side, but really went down to become a firefighter and paramedic first because that took, specific courses and so on. And I was always kind of dabbling in the real estate side. And as soon as I turned 21 and got a full-time job, it was the foreclosure era of 2008. So I jumped in and bought a house. Had no clue what I was doing, had no clue how to answer the questions, anything. And I was like, man, I got to learn this stuff because this is a way bigger game than I realized. So I started taking courses. I actually did the Rich Dad education program, which it was beneficial, but very expensive to do it. And finally, pulled the trigger on that first deal. It was probably 2010-ish, 10, 11 maybe, when we bought that first investment property. And it was a rental was the intention. We were going to do the BRRRR. And we bought it and started rehabbing it, getting all the work done, got a renter in there that went to refinance. And the strategy did work well. It took us a whole year, though, to get it done and get our money back out. So then we realized, we're only going to move so quickly here, doing this one at a time. We're going to have to figure out something. So that put us down the route of more flipping the houses to try to get that cash rolling. So we could flip a cash and get money back in 3 to 4 months. And then we could build that up. And then we could do 2 houses at once and kind of keep going. And lo and behold, too, once you get going, I had no idea. But then all of a sudden, friends and family are like, hey, I saw you're flipping some houses. I got some money I'd like to invest. Are you looking for investors? And my grandpa was a huge supporter on the investment side after we knocked out our first few. And man, it was just off to the races at that point then. And then once that engine got rolling, it was the momentum was going. And that's kind of where it took me today is now we're doing multifamily. We do storage. We run a family office, but it was a long ride to get there and a ton of stuff in the middle there that, I never dreamed or imagined would be part of my story when I was standing there in college and decided, hey, I want to be a fireman, do real estate. But now looking back, it's pretty fun and pretty amazing, all the craziness that we've gone through over the last, decade plus.
Oh, yeah, man. A ton of growth from, again, starting small and getting to where you're at. To that point, though, at some point, it seems like you realized that flipping wasn't necessarily the most sustainable approach to your goals of financial freedom. So kind of how did you balance that capital generation as well as transitioning to kind of some more long-term cash flowing assets?
Yeah, so the idea was always that the cash flow would be there for retirement. That was the basis. Everybody kind of believes in that retirement. I call it a myth now that I realize, but at the time, I didn't really know. So I knew it'd be nice to have some cash flowing properties in retirement, but I knew I didn't have the capital. So I realized, all right, we got to get capital first. Once we get the capital, we can start putting it to work to cash flowing assets. So we started down that path. And then same thing. In the beginning, we realized that 1 house per year is not going to work. Switch to flipping and do the capital. But then we realized too, man, this is going to take forever to gain this capital, to really put it to work in big time properties. But then we started having investors come along at the same time. And then we had access to capital and the ability. So then we could start, instead of flipping these houses, we could flipped more to the BRRRR strategy. And we weren't waiting for a year for capital because we had investor capital on the sideline. So we'd borrow investor capital, go buy a property, fix it up, rent it. That thing would be put to rent for about a year, and then we'd refinance it, get all that capital back. But in the meantime, we had another investor who would fund another property. So we were always continuously going and building that portfolio. And we probably got to about 30 or so properties. Some we'd sell off and get a better one, but we were at about 30 or so. And then we bought our first apartment complex. And that was a 30-unit apartment complex. And once I bought that, I had 30 single-family rentals, a couple duplexes and fourplexes and stuff, but all lower unit stuff. And once we bought that first apartment complex, it was like, this is crazy. I just knocked out in 1 year what I had done in the last 10. Like, I got to switch to apartments. And I don't think we bought a house ever since that first apartment that we bought.
Oh, yeah, man. I could only imagine it'd be so hard to start going back as you see those new numbers rolling in. But to that point, as you're doing all this, man, was this something you're doing full time on the side? How is that going down during this initial kind of snowball phase?
Yeah, in the beginning, it was a lot of, it was full-time firefighter, full-time real estate investor. So I go work at the firehouse, and you do have downtime. You're not running calls 24/7. So a lot of work on the computer. Anything I could get done on the computer, I did while I was at the firehouse. Then I'd come home, and then there's all the hands-on stuff. And we weren't doing all of the work ourselves, building walls and hanging drywall, but you still have to go check and make sure they're there. My dad would go get a load of supplies to make sure the contractors could keep working and they weren't waiting on supplies. And you're always dealing with inspectors and, the grass that was supposed to be cut and it didn't get cut, but you have showings tomorrow to sell this house. So you got to run over there and cut it quick and all those little things. So it was definitely a kind of a double full-time job. And we definitely tried to find that work-life balance, but it's definitely tough too in the beginning when you're building a business. There's definitely some grinding that takes place, and unfortunately, that's just part of the game.
And was the approach to it truly business in terms of like some of that cash flow you had to put back in to kind of help pay people as you're going on? Or was a lot of that cash flow returned into continuing to grow that snowball?
Yeah, it was all returning to keep just growing that business. We didn't pull a penny from it, And when you have a wife and kids at home and you're doing all this work, it's hard to justify when she's like, I feel like we should have more money than we do. And I'm like, well, we technically do, but we just bought another property. So we put it all into that property and it just kept going one after another. But same thing. You have to, in the beginning, you just have to do that. You have to be willing to take the sacrifice for the first few years. And it really, I think if we didn't do those sacrifices in the beginning, we probably never would have had the blessings that we had of doing the apartment and kind of getting to that next level. So it worked out in the end, but it was definitely tough in those early days, always putting that money back in. You feel like you're working for nothing. Like you see on paper that money growing, but you never actually feel it. You're not driving some awesome, nice, fancy car. You're not going out to eat every night. Like you're probably living more poor than you were before because you see the light at the end of the tunnel. And every penny that you put back into the business, that penny gets to go to work and keep growing then. So it's even more likely to cut back spending and keep trying to grow that business and get it to where it needs to be.
For sure. And so was that next step into the apartment complexes because you hit kind of a cash flow goal? Like, hey, man, I need to make sure I'm bringing in $20K a month to cover the financing of these apartments? Or what was kind of the goal of moving to that next step?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, total honesty, I don't think I ever would have made that step if I didn't get pushed into that step. So I met a guy that was on a mission trip with me. We were on mission trips down in Guatemala. And this guy came with his family down there, and I was just doing some real estate. I was actually buying a 4-unit, and I was running numbers. 4 units weren't necessarily real common. A lot of it was single-family houses for us, so I was just trying to make sure I didn't miss anything. And he was like, oh, I do some real estate. I'll take a look at it. So he took a look, and we just kind of had a little bit of talk. Well, when we got back home from that trip, he gave me a call and said, hey, you want to go get some coffee? And I sat down with him, and we had a conversation. Turns out he buys all kinds of apartments, hundreds of units at a time across the United States. Of course, he didn't let on to that at the moment, but now we're sitting in this coffee shop, and he said, actually, I want to run something by you. He said, there's a 30-unit apartment complex here in town, and he said, it's too small for me, but I hate for something in our backyard to go to somebody else. Would you want to partner on this? And basically, you run the whole show, and I'll kind of just be your backstop. So if you run into a snag, just give me a call, and I'll walk you through it. If something, we need something at the bank, and they want to see a little bit more high net worth come in, then I'll sign on those docs with you. We'll partner on everything, but you run it, you be the manager, you run the operations. And it was just too good of an opportunity to turn down. So it was scary as could be, but I had total faith in him. And once we did it, I was like, man, I can't believe that I waited this long. I can't believe I spent 10 years to build a portfolio of 30 houses. And in one swoop, I just took down 30 units and we rehabbed that first unit. You learned all the questions and, everything you do. You open a wall and find out, that's not supposed to be there. What are we going to do with this electric here now? But all of a sudden, every single unit was exactly the same. So unit 2, 3, 4, when we were doing those rehabs, man, they were flying one after another. And then same thing for guys to be working on one unit. Let's say if we're doing a house, they're working at one house. It's super inefficient for them to drive across town to work on another house. So they stay committed. But when you have everything at one location, they got guys that are laying flooring in one unit and the other guys are painting in the next and the other guys are ripping out the next one. And that cycle just keeps going all the time. So we ripped through 30 units in 1 year, got the refinance, pulled all of our capital back out, plus a large majority. I mean, it was just like a slam dunk deal. And I was like, wow, I cannot believe I never knew about this. I can't believe I didn't have the confidence to go chase it. But also after that point, there was no way I was ever going back to doing the small stuff again because it was such bigger numbers and so much easier, so much more efficient. So I think it was such a blessing because you're so right, because putting all that work in is what gave that guy the confidence to call me. And if he didn't see that track record before and see that capability, then he never would have called and that opportunity would have never been there. And, people do talk about it all the time. I would start with a 12 unit, 15 unit, 30 unit. Man, if you could, I would as well. If you got that kind of confidence behind you, I would as well. But I don't think, even when at the time that I did it, I wasn't quite ready to do it on my own. And I don't think I could have ever started there. Doing the first house on my own, I was pretty scared. So.
And was this your first experience kind of with a partner or a joint venture? Was that also a first for you?
Yeah. So my dad and I had built the business together from the beginning. So when I started, I was 21 years old. I thought, no way will a bank or anybody give me money at 21 years old. So I called my dad and my dad was like, I want nothing to do with it. So I had to beg him and plead. And finally he said, all right, let's do it. And we partnered on it. And we've been partners ever since in all of the real estate. But this was the first time that we had somebody outside that partnered. And you got to build out an operating agreement. You got to have attorneys review it, make sure you thought of all those things. And definitely, a lot of pieces that were kind of just that next step up from what we were doing.
And just to kind of complete the whole circle here, right? Your next step was then into just continued commercial properties and then eventually some storage and other things. What are some of the things you kind of are doing today?
Yeah, we do all apartments and storage for the most part. We'll dabble in some other things just to kind of test them out. But basically, I did the apartments on my own initially. And then we got into syndicating. So then we're raising capital from people to go take down the apartments. And the storage was kind of the same idea. I had somebody who wanted to be the operator on the storage side. And he basically needed, just like I had that mentor who kind of backed me, he needed somebody to do that for him. So I was like, yeah, that's going to be great. So I backed him. He turned out to be a great operator. But the storage is kind of at the phase where we're basically testing our money and making sure we build out the processes and we understand it. And then we'll roll that into what we do now with our fund. But basically went from the apartments to syndicating apartments. And at the same time, testing out our skills in storage, and the apartments transitioned into the fund that we operate. And then the storage will come right into that fund as well. So we'll just kind of skip the syndicating stage with the storage now that we have the fund up and running.
Okay. Very cool. And building on now this kind of wholesome idea, how are you assessing potential investments today now that you help manage these high net worth individuals compared to when you first started? What are some of the things that you wish you would have done differently at the beginning that you're doing now?
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of change. It's really basically kind of the way I looked at it. So I always had a full-time job when I started the real estate. So my goal always was a safe bet. I never really wanted to swing for the fences because I just couldn't chance losing money. I wanted to make sure that first and foremost, it was a safe bet. And then hopefully we can turn that into a home run. So it's just the basis of my investing strategy has always been that, like, swing for singles and then we'll work the deal to see if we can make it better. So it's really stayed kind of in that same mindset, and really even managing the money now, working with our family office. Really, I tell everybody in there as well that this is built first and foremost for me and my family. So this is my investing principles. I like to play it safe. Of course, I want to hit a home run if possible, but I'm not going to swing for a home run and chance a strikeout. I can't sleep with a strikeout. So that's what my investing principles are. And really, I just kind of share with people, this is why I do investing the way I do. This is why I set it up this way for my family. This is what I see in the future. If your beliefs and principles are the same as mine, then it's going to be a great fit. But if you're not the same as mine, then it's just not a good fit. There's going to be other people out there that can help you, go after your goals. So really it hasn't changed a lot. The numbers have gotten bigger, the deals have gotten bigger, but the basis of the understanding has been pretty consistent. Even the strategies that we use with kind of that BRRRR strategy, really it's not any different. We just buy apartments now, we fix them all up just like we did houses. We raise the value, we refinance them out and repeat and roll that capital into the next one. So even that basic structure is pretty much the same as when we did our first house.
Okay, so most of the portfolios are still REI focused. You don't really have kind of a blended approach to some of these portfolios?
Yeah, everything is real estate focused right now. We definitely are looking for some private business to add to it just because a lot of people, so I'm a real estate professional, so tax-wise, I get to use all the benefits of the depreciation. A lot of the people that are in the family office and the fund, they don't have the ability to be a real estate professional. So they're basically building up these suspended losses with depreciation. So now we're starting to look to try to add in some passive gains, some good cash flowing businesses that maybe they don't give off a lot of losses. And typically for a doctor, for instance, if they make a lot of money, that cash flowing business is going to be taxed extremely heavily. But now we've built up all these losses for them to offset these gains. So now it's time to start adding some of those gains. So we have a background in construction. That's kind of one of the angles that we're looking at. And then, of course, we work with a lot of doctors. So private practice and those opportunities just make sense for us just because we have such a solid backing of people that are in that world every day that can give us a lot of insight, into the different deals and how things operate.
And is a lot of your portfolios also helping kind of provide guidance and knowledge to your clients to do a lot of like wholesome perspective of what you're really trying? And you talked about at the beginning, you kind of put your beliefs on the table, but then as they're with you, are you doing a lot of guidance like continuously to kind of help keep them educated on these items?
Yeah, so we started with just the fund, which was just investing. Basically, you want to put your money with us, here's how we do it, we'll go invest it. And then the fund grew into where people had a lot of questions. And why are we doing things this way? How can I do this? My tax guy doesn't really know what to do now that I have this K1 with all these losses. He doesn't know how it works. So it started to evolve to try to help people answer these questions. And then we started the family office. And the family office now is where it's really much more of a holistic approach. So if our fund is a good investment option for somebody, then they can put money with us. But there's also people that don't put money into the fund and they just take the guidance and they want to go do active real estate. They want to maybe just go buy their own duplex and do a BRRRR strategy on their own. Or maybe they want to do a short-term rental and take advantage of some of the tax benefits that they can take with a short-term rental, oil and gas investments for tax benefits, different things like that. So that the family office is really that holistic approach. And then we basically have an investment option for them. If they want to go totally passive, they don't want to go interview operators and figure out who they can trust and who they can't, we do have an investment option for them. If they just want straight coaching and they don't want to do anything passive, they're a total DIYer and they just want to do it all actively, then for that person, it looks a lot more like coaching. For the other people, it looks a lot more like just investment advising, but everybody's under the same family office and, they all get the same guidance and ideas. But the whole idea is to really nail down their individualized goals of what they're trying to do. How much effort are they going to put into the investment? Where are they trying to be in 5 years? Where are they trying to be in 10 years? And then build out a plan customized for them to make sure they're going to hit those targets.
And it seems like now, as we've been talking, a lot of your approach is essentially why wait for retirement, right? If there's things you can do today to get yourself to where you want to be without waiting until you're 60, take action into it. So to that point, if you were to help kind of get someone started today, where would you say they should start and why?
Oh, man. Where to start? That's a tough one to say because everything is individualized. And I think the answer is tough to give you. And I think the reason is because that retirement myth is just such an annoyance to me because it wants to generalize everybody and say all Americans have the same plan, work until 59 and a half, and then you retire. So they all put the money into the 401k. And all of this generalization that everybody is preached is great for Wall Street, terrible for the individual. And everybody does it day after day. So, man, when I sat around a firehouse, I don't know if you're familiar with firehouse, but typically you work 30 years. You have a pension, so you really can't leave. You got to stay there to get your pension. Everybody stays, and everybody talks about what they're going to do in retirement. And I was 21 years old watching these guys in their 50s and telling their dreams, and then they would retire. And they'd be back at the firehouse a week later, a year later, 3 years later. And I'm a young, dumb kid. I'm like, dude, how is it? Did you move to Arizona? Did you go to Mexico for a month? Did you do that dream? My back hurts. I blew out my knee. It just doesn't work. I got like not one of them was living this dream that 5 years later, they were just telling me how when they retire, they're going to go do this. And I was like, what? nobody does this. This is such a fake idea of retirement. Nobody actually retires and just lives the dream. Now, some people may enjoy life, but you just don't enjoy life at 65 the same way you do at 35. You can just do things differently. You can go hike longer. You can bike down the side of a mountain. When you're 65, you're just going to be at a different physical age, a different mental age. You're going to be slowing down, and it's crazy to me because everybody sees it, but they don't recognize what they're seeing. They realize that this is going on all around them. They realize typically, what I've seen is people work for 10 to 15 years and then they start to feel it. And they're like, something's not right. Like, I feel like I've been working forever, but when I look at when I'm going to retire, that still feels forever away. And they start to get stuck in the middle and think like, dude, what am I doing? This doesn't feel right. I don't think I could do this for another 15, 20 years and give off living today. But they're stuck. They put all their money in a 401k. They have no way to get access to it. Even if their 401k has millions, they can't touch it until a certain age. So they're stuck, which just drives me nuts. So that's what I love about, the family office, because I love giving that light bulb moment. I love seeing it click for people, and then people go all in, and then I get to see the bounty of that, as the cash flow starts kicking in and people start going and living that dream. And we have one person in the family office, they're going to Mexico for a month this January. And they're like, I've been dreaming about it, thinking. I'm like, you can do it. Like, just go. Just take off work and do it. Who cares? Pull from that 401k, whatever that $5,000 you were going to put in the 401k, just don't put it in January and go live. It'll be a memory that you will never forget. And if you're 60, when your kids are all grown up, you're going to wish that you would have went back and done that, and it's just so much easier to achieve than people realize. But the marketing and the media for the 401k and the Wall Street options are so powerful. It's hard to overcome that marketing. It's hard to do opposite of what everybody is doing. It's hard to say, I'm going to start focusing on cash flow when your parents are saying, you got to save in your 401k. Are you crazy? The 401k is there for a reason. And everybody in your life is trying to preach to you to do the same as everybody else. And I mean, we all know it. Typically in life, when you're doing the same as everybody else, you're not living an extraordinary life. You're living an ordinary life. And that's just not really fun, So I tell people ask, like, what's the ideal client for the family office? And I basically tell people, anybody who's fed up with good enough. If you say, like, my life is good enough and you're happy with that, then you are not an ideal client. But if you think my life is good enough, but I would like to live an amazing life as well, then let's do it. You're an ideal client. I don't care if you make $100,000 or $1 million. Like, we'll figure out a way if you have that mindset, and we'll make it happen. So yeah, dude, the why wait for retirement has become my motto because it's just crushing human beings. It just drives me insane. And I have felt it, so.
No, for sure, man. And I kind of want to touch on some of that there, right? Is getting someone to make that leap from this idea of, save for retirement, put all that money towards that 401k, right? Which previous generations have done very well for themselves on, right? We can't discredit that. To that point, with the holistic approach to helping people save and grow through real estate, is some of your offerings building on the ideas of like putting money rather than a 401k, maybe into like a self-directed IRA and utilizing some of that money while still getting tax savings? Again, for not everyone who's got, millions of dollars a year, to your point, someone maybe starting at 100K, are you looking at options like self-directed IRAs for the tax savings as well as still getting money into real estate assets?
Sometimes. So most of the people we work with are going to be making too much money to qualify for the IRA savings anyways. So we will, if we have the ability, we'll roll 401ks out of old employers or something into a self-directed IRA. But typically a self-directed IRA, if it's only going to be, the $5,000, $6,000 a year, it's just not enough money to really get the ball rolling. So if you have an old 401k, we'll roll it over. But really what we do is we focus on the cash flowing properties. And when we're doing real estate, we have so much depreciation that you really get the tax benefit in and of itself. So you start getting cash flow, but on paper, you're getting losses. And most people don't realize how taxes work, that you have an income statement, which is what you're taxed on. That is what the paper says that you made or lost. But then you have cash flow, which is actually the amount of money that hits your bank account. And you're not taxed on cash flow, you're taxed on the income statement. So as long as we set up investments that control the cash flow and control the income statement, we get to decide how much we pay in taxes and how much hits the bank account based on the investment choice that we make. But really, the investment side of things is very simple. We do let people, when people are making a lot of money, we don't discourage putting into the 401k because it's a great tax strategy. Some of these people, it's a 30% savings right out of the gate. There might be an employer match. Like, you just can't pass up that guaranteed home run of 30%. But what we do when they put that money into a 401k is we're already planning for how are we going to get this money out of the 401k down the road tax-free. What real estate are we going to use today to start building up losses? Are we going to plan for a discounted rollover of this 401k to get it to a Roth and avoid some taxes? So we realize that the 401k is very much a tax strategy. It is not a retirement strategy. The investments we do today are for cash flow to buy your time back starting as soon as possible. But the 401k is a good tax strategy to basically we're making money. And if we make 50 grand, we want to put that money in our 401k, not give it to the government. So if that's our two options, we're going to use the 401k. But outside of that, we're going to focus on cash flow and make sure that we're focused on getting money into our bank account today. You know, if you look at an income statement, you have the earned wages, and then below that, you have investment income. And all we're trying to do is if your earned wages are $500,000 a year, $200,000 a year, we're trying to start moving some of that income down to the investment column because the investment means that you're not working, your money's working for you. And over time, that 300, 500,000, all of a sudden 500,000 switches to 400 and 100. And then before you know it, it's 300 for earned and 200 on investment. And all of a sudden, you're basically retired because the investment income is coming. One more point, I don't want to keep rambling, but the other thing that nobody realizes is that it is not normal to just walk away and stop working. You can now work 50 hours per week, and then on the day of retirement, never work again. People go out of their mind. They're so bored. They've had something to do 50 hours a week for their entire livelihood, and all of a sudden now they have nothing to do. And that's why those hobbies, they think I'm going to go play golf every day. It's like, well, you can play golf every day. That's 3 hours. You still have 30 hours that week to do something with. So that's the other kind of key point that people don't realize is as you buy your time back and focus on cash flow today, if you make 500 grand, the truth is you don't need to replace 500 grand to retire. You really need to replace a couple 100,000, 100, 200, because you're going to find a happy medium where maybe you work 20 to 30 hours a week and it feels good to still go and do what you're good at and still perform at your highest level. It feels good to do that. It just sucks when you have to do that. If you do 30, but the boss says you have to do 50, that's the part that sucks. The initial 30 is fun. You enjoy doing it. So that's what people don't realize. They set this goal of like, what's my income today? The one thing is that income has huge taxes on it. So that's not really what's hitting their bank account. So we already have a reduction in what we have to hit. And then really, we only got to hit about half of that for you to be like amazingly happy in your life because you don't want to stop working. Truthfully, you feel like you do when you have to. But the moment you don't have to work anymore, work is very easy to go do.
Awesome, man. And I'm just curious, as we talked on like the liquidating the 4K side of things, is a lot of your strategy when liquidating that to kind of help roll that person in essentially like an LP role in the syndication for some of the projects you're trying to put together? Is that kind of the strategy there? Or again, or is it kind of being diffused across a couple different assets? What's the approach when you're helping pull money out of those retirement accounts?
Yeah, so typically if somebody's working still and they're going to be working, that 401k, that money pulling out is basically going to be limited to a loan. So the max is going to be $50,000. So they'll pull that $50,000 out, put it into a cash flowing asset, an investment of some sort. And then everything we do has a refinance. So you get that 50 grand back, you put it back into the 401k until the next investment comes, pull that 50 grand back out, put it to work. So you're basically getting the tax benefit, but still having access to at least 50,000 of it. The liquidating of the 401k, that's going to be years down the road, So once they turn 59 and a half, once we have access to it, then we'll start looking, all right, does it make sense for them then to become a real estate professional and they can pull this money out as they build losses because the taxes will be offset by the depreciation? Does it make sense to look for a discounted rollover? So all of this traditional money that would be taxed, we're going to convert it to a Roth at a discounted rollover because we do a private investment or, an apartment, an office building to apartment conversion, something like that. There's a number of different ways. We look at doing something like Rob's that we're going to start, roll into a business and they're going to start doing a new practice down the road or invest with somebody and they're going to roll their 401k into that type of a startup. There's a million options, but the whole game plan is that we have to start building that path out before they get to that day. They can't turn 59 and a half and say, well, I got to pull all my money now because I need money to live on and we have no tax strategy in place. So we got to take advantage of the taxes while they're working. But we just have to know that as we get closer to retirement age, we have to have our plan of how are we going to pull this money out without paying taxes. I tell people all the time, especially, like I said, we work with a lot of doctors, but most people that make doctor wages, and they get so upset when they find out that they don't have to pay taxes if they would set their tax strategy up correctly. But it's also a lot of work. It's not just a simple switch that you flip and you don't pay taxes. And that's what I always tell them, like, if you're as mad as you are right now about paying taxes while you work, just think how mad you're going to be if you don't take action and you got to pay these taxes right when you're retired, just like you do today. So like, even if you're paying them today, at least realize that you can start building your strategy today to prepare for when retirement comes. So at least you're not paying the same taxes like you are today and just pulling out, distributions out of the 401k and paying taxes on it every year like everybody else. At least know that you missed the boat right now in your 30s, 40s, 50s, but don't miss the boat again. That's your fault then if you now know and you miss the boat again.
So for those DIYers who maybe have 10, 20, 30 years until they're even going to think about pulling out their 401k, a good strategy to be is that, hey man, as long as I have a minimum of 50K in that 401k, take a loan from myself out and look to maybe invest that in some assets during that time.
Yeah, so you got to have 100,000 minimum because you can take the max is 50% or 50,000. But a lot of people do have 100,000 in their 401k. So yeah, you pull that 50,000 out and now you have some capital to put to work. And even people ask, if you're borrowing money, the first thing to say is how much money are you putting in of your own? Well, at least you can say 50,000 now that you have access to. And exactly like you said, you put that into investing, you're using that 50 grand to buy cash flowing properties today. I mean, you could take that 50,000, you could buy a short-term rental and utilize the benefits of a short-term rental, totally offset, 50 grand in taxes, and your return on that $50,000 loan would literally be 100% because you took 50,000 out, put it to work, and you got 50,000 back on your taxes that you would have not gotten otherwise. So, I mean, there's a million different ways to do it, but that gives you a good solid 50 grand, to get the game going and start working with. A lot of people have home equity line of credit as well, where they have a lot of access to cash there. But the one caveat, and this is why we're very particular on who we work with, because we got to get to know them, because other times what people do is pull that 50 grand out and they don't find an investment, but they've always wanted that new boat or they've always really wanted a Corvette and they'll go buy some depreciating asset. They'll blow the 50 grand and now they've lost it and they don't have 50 grand in their 401k anymore. And now they've totally screwed it up. So you can't do it if you're not disciplined, but if you're disciplined, it's a great strategy. And if you're disciplined, like I tell people, I mean, if you've never missed a payment in your life, why would you start missing one now? You're just going to figure it out. So even if you take on that 401k payment because it's a loan and you got to pay it, you're going to pay it. You're going to magically cut out Starbucks. You're going to magically adjust your life to make sure that you never miss a payment. So you might as well get that money to work for you today. And that's just a good starting point to finally get some cash flowing assets coming in. The idea is just making your money. When you got George Washington dollar bills in your hand, that guy's got to be going out to work for you. If he's not going out to work for you, that means the only way money's hitting your bank account is you're trading your time for money. And until you start sending George Washington's time out to work for you, you're going to be working until the day that you die, until that switch flips and you figure out how to make your money work for you instead of your body, going out and putting in the time and going to work every day.
Well, for sure, Doc, I kind of want to touch on that idea too, right? If your syndication strategy is to refinance out every 3 to 5 years, it means every 3 to 5 years, you now have 50K you can pull back out of your 401k to put towards another deal and another deal and another deal, right? So if you have 30 years, let's say a 5-year max, you're able to do 6 more deals, 5 years for 30 years, over that time with that same 50K that you wouldn't have done elsewise. It would have been sitting in your 401k, making probably average, whatever the market's doing. So at that point, again, a loan it's money that had you waited till 60 to touch, you wouldn't have these 5 or so assets helping you generate that cash flow. So that's huge. It's something I don't think people talk about enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem is these are somewhat more advanced strategies, but if they're not difficult, but they are a little bit more advanced. And it's not as simple as just fill out a piece of paper and some money gets deducted from your paycheck and goes to a 401k. And people are paying all kinds of fees and they're leaving all kinds of options on the table. And it just simply comes down to lack of knowledge. They just don't know how these work. They'll listen to a podcast like this and think that's a great idea, but then they don't quite know how do the puzzle pieces get together. Like they get the concept, they can see the picture on the box of the puzzle, right? But then when you open the box, it's all these pieces scattered. And like, well, how do you put these together to make it actually look like what he was talking about? And it just really comes down to that analogy. It's not necessarily difficult, but it does take some effort to figure out how that puzzle goes together. But once you figure it out, then you repeat that the second, third, fourth time you do that puzzle, it's much easier, much easier, much easier. But the same thing, right? We talked about, family and friends. You tell somebody you're going to take 50K out of your 401k to go buy an investment property. There's probably not one person in most people's lives that's going to say, go for it. That's a great idea. So not only is it a little bit overwhelming and complicated, everybody else in their life is playing it super safe and going basic vanilla investing strategy. So unless you have somebody to turn to that's going to say, here's how to do it. I've done this puzzle a million times. Here's how the puzzle goes together. And I did it as well. I promise it'll work. You can do it. Most people don't have that person in their life. So they're stuck, just kind of reading on the internet and dreaming about how could I ever do this, So that's why I love doing this podcast with you guys and stuff too, because, man, dude, I think the word needs to get out there. People need to know that it's possible. This isn't crazy, complicated, unbelievable stuff you need attorneys to do. You just need somebody to help you put the puzzle together, or you can do it on your own. It's just going to take a little longer and take some research. But if you're a DIYer and you love research, just go start researching it. Start finding out how people do it. Watch more podcasts. Ask questions. Go on ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm trying to do this. I'm stuck. How would I do it if I was, Mike Neubauer doing it? And I'll be like, well, he might consider doing it this way. Like, oh, that's a great idea. I mean, there's a million ways to find the answers nowadays.
For sure. And again, I think that's key in terms of even the ultra DIYer. Man, you either may struggle with this first one, or even if for some reason you finally hand over the keys to someone else. Hey, help me through this. Again, if you tell a solid syndicator, hey man, I've got $50K that I want to pull out of my 401k. Can you help me find the right syndication for me? To your point, there's plenty of people out there who say, yeah, go for it. And man, here's how I would approach it. To your point of just get out there and start doing it, right? Don't sit on your hands and be the vanilla approach. Go out there and do something unique and create some cash flow and some financial freedom for yourself.
Yeah. And the other thing, a lot of people look at and they'll say, I want to get better returns. Then they think like, if I'm going to pull out of my 401k, then it's got to be better returns. But what they miss is two pieces of it is like, even if you make, say, 0% on your first deal, you just break even. You still put that puzzle together once, and the next one is going to be life-changing maybe. So that first one is not as important. It's more important just to get it done than it is how much did you outpace what your 401k would have done. And the other thing is people don't realize is when you take a holistic approach, it's not just how much did my 401k make. If we use that 50 grand to implement it in an investment that buys you back your time and your tax money, I mean, what kind of investment return do you put on buying back 3 hours of your life every single week? Or what kind of investment, return if you talk about the taxes that were saved because you invested 50 grand of cash and you got 50 grand back from the government? I mean, that's 100% return, but people don't look at it in that way because it's just same thing. It's a little bit more advanced, a little bit more strategic. Most people just don't have these people in their life. They call their CPA swamped in tax returns. And he's like, yeah, I've never heard of it. Or yeah, it's a great idea. I'm super busy. If you want to set up a time, we can talk later. Or they talk to somebody and they're like, yeah, it's $400 an hour. I'm happy to talk with you. And then people are like, well, 400, this could take 10 hours. Like, I can't pay $4,000 to figure this out. And then they kind of just let it go, and it's sad because it's just the way that a lot of things, a lot of people go down that path, and it drives me insane because I know I could have went down that path, but I went down a different path. So I see it and I'm like hollering back, like, hey, turn left. I'm telling you guys, like, trust me, turn left, and I just can't get the word out there enough to try to get people to realize how great the life is when you do this. And what I tell people too is like, what they don't realize, if you focus on cash flow today and buying your time back today, by default, you also took care of retirement because that cash flow doesn't go away. And you also took care of when you're in your 90s and you need long-term care insurance to pay whatever. Those rentals keep depositing money into your checking account. And when you pass away and your kids inherit your money, that money just keeps hitting the bank account. So if you focus on today, buying your time back today, by default, you're taking care of forever after this. But most people don't realize that. They're sold that dream of the retirement thing. And by the time they're to retirement, they don't have any time left to really create cash flow. So they just kind of whittle away that 401k until there's nothing left. They take Social Security and, there's some money left to kids. The kids blow it, in the first few years, and they start the process all over, building up 401k and repeating the whole same thing again, where if they had cash flow, it would be generational forever. And that investment, we're buying properties that were built in the 60s, 70s, sometimes 50s. I mean, these things have been cash flowing for 70 years. They're going to keep cash flowing. And if they don't, somebody's just going to build a new cash flowing property on that site, and it'll keep cash flowing for another 70 years.
And for those going, okay, yeah, that's a strategy for me. From your experience with these various ventures and projects, how can someone make sure that whoever they decide to do business with is a solid syndicator or partner? From your experience, what are some good things maybe to ask or to look for when you're trying to find these deals?
Yeah, to be honest, man, I did a podcast with an attorney about red flags to look for. So I think that's like a more in-depth answer to that specific question. But really, I think it comes down to kind of how that mentor brought me into that 30-unit apartment is just ask what people are doing, talk with them, and you get a feel for, do I trust this person or not? You know, you don't have to go pick a stranger on the internet. There's probably people in your backyard that are doing something like this. There's probably somebody that was like me 10 years ago, flipping houses and wanted an investor, and I was willing to take investors on, and find that person where you can go see the property. You can go get involved. You know, you can see what they're doing. We used to buy sheriff sales. You can go with that guy to the sheriff sale and see how it works. Figure it out. If you're given 50 grand and you say, I'd like to see the sheriff sale where the house that we're going to buy that I'm going to give 50 grand to, they'll take you and do that. If you're a DIYer and you want to do that, I would say, like we talked about in the beginning, right? You can start at 30 units. I can't say that'd be my advice because I think that'd be very overwhelming and I think you won't pull the trigger. But if you are willing to, start there. But I think if you're a DIYer, just get a single family rental done. Just get a purchase done. Get somebody in there, rent it out, run through a refinance cycle. You know, when you get an appraisal done, you can ask a couple realtors their opinion of the after repair value. You can kind of work it out where you're just trying to get a single. You're just trying to get one deal done. Like I said, at the end of the day, maybe you break even and you cash flow $100. Well, you got that first one done. And now you can buy a duplex and you can start growing from there. If you want to, you know, a lot of people we work with too, we have some people that are super DIYer, but a lot of them are like, I'm working 50 hours a week. Like, I'm just not going to have the time. It's easier for me to pick up another shift and make $1,000 than try to go learn this whole real estate game. If that's the case, then find a good... Syndications are fine. They create a lot of taxable events. I like the fund model a lot better. There's starting to be some more family offices out there, but I really like the family office approach. Find somebody that you can trust and you can just put your money and park it and just make sure that their incentives align with your incentives. So like my money, when I put into the fund, if I make money, you're making money. I don't make money, you're not making money. Like every incentive is aligned that like, if I make money, you also make money, which that's good. You want the guy running the show to be incentivized to make money. And I think that's really the key is just finding some other people. Man, I feel like just feeling them out and trusting them, but I really feel like it's just that trust meter. You know, I think we all have it built in. There's no like perfect question. There's no just exact. It's really just having conversations and feeling like, A, does this guy have any clue what he's doing, or a girl? You know, do they have any idea what they're doing? Do they actually have my best interest at heart? Are they actually capable of bringing out what they promise they're going to do? And are they going to be doing this on a regular basis? You know, like, is this a long-term plan for me? And if you can feel that from somebody, I'm not saying they answer the questions perfectly. Like, you don't say like, do you have my best interest at heart? Like, they're going to say, yeah, of course. But if you feel that deeply in the conversation, then I would start, you know, if you're going to pull out 50,000, maybe only give 30 and you leave 20 on the sideline because you're a little nervous. But if you got 50 in your 401k and 50 in cash in the bank, I would go 50 into the deal, feel it out. Worst case scenario, you lose a couple grand because you made some mistakes. But that's going to create that muscle where next time you're not going to make that mistake again. And that's very valuable, you know. And what I tell people as well is people are nervous to pull the trigger and really get going, whether they want to invest with us and they're nervous to do that, or we show them how to buy their first property and they're nervous to do that first one. What I always tell people is like, you are on a track to retire at age 60. Worst case scenario, this all goes wrong and you work until 61. You work one extra year. So the worst case scenario, you work one extra year, which you may end up doing anyways. You don't know because you're 10, 15 years away anyways. So you work one extra year, or everything goes right and you shave 10 years off that time and you live an amazing life for the next 15. It's like an amazing life or work one extra year. I'm taking that bet every time. That's like the most asymmetrical risk reward analysis in the world. I'm taking that bet every single time. But I think a lot of people they don't actually think it through and realize that risk reward analysis. And they put a ton of weight on the risk of like, what if I lose 10 grand? And it's like, well, what's the reward? Well, you may lose 10 grand, but you may buy back 10 years of your life. Like, dude, if you could buy back 10 grand, 10 years of your life for 10 grand, you're going to do that. And they just kind of mix that up because I really think it's the marketing and that whole culture, but they don't think clearly about what am I actually risking and what is the potential gain if this goes right? And if they did that analysis accurately, I think way more people will be jumping in and taking that action for that first step.
For sure. And dude, again, you have so much knowledge and experience over a decade within this industry. Was there any valuable resources such as books, creators, influencers, whatever it may be during your journey that you would recommend to others?
Yeah. So the one book, I mean, I'll give you a few that kind of walk down that path, right? So the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, some people love it, some people hate it, but I'll tell you, it is the one book that actually changes your mindset. It makes you realize I'm getting lied to every single day. This whole idea of work till 60 is BS. So like, if nothing else, at least that book paints it in a way that is understandable to say, this is not the right path. I need to figure something else out. There's a ton of business books, but I would say the business books are really going to be what niche you're kind of choosing. You know, I would probably get more involved in kind of the forums and podcasts to feel out what niche kind of calls to my name. What am I going to do well with? So I'd say that's probably for the next step of books. The one book that very much changed my life is called Life and Air. It's not a very popular book, but it's gaining a lot of traction. That book changed my life because it talks about the fact that money is simply a tool for creating an amazing life. And most people give up their life to achieve money. And that's the exact opposite purpose of money. You're not supposed to give up life to achieve money. You're supposed to use money to live an amazing life. So that really helped make that shift for me to realize and kind of tie all these pieces together. But I mean, some of those books are great. I will say the one thing that I think has been powerful for me is I don't read a ton of books every year. But when I read a book, I write down the points that I need from it. I review them. I take notes. I re-review them. And then I start thinking, how can I apply this in my business and my life? And then I go take action. And then I'll review, all right, have I knocked any of these steps out? And once I've done it, then I'll add another book and keep growing. But I think in the beginning, I read a lot of books and I never applied any of the knowledge. And then I'd be right on to learning more. And I'm like, man, I got all this knowledge. I've never applied any of it. I'm sure it'd be very helpful if I just actually did what I said I was going to do when I read the book. So I've become a lot more conservative on reading books. You know, people are recommending books all the time. And I'm like, man, I'm not done implementing the stuff from the last one. So it's going to take me a little bit, you know, to get to this next book. But those are some really good starters to get that mindset going until you do your first deal is those few books.
For sure, man. You're taking very much the quality over quantity approach, and that's huge, right? Making sure you're acting on those items. So that's great. And to that point, being a valuable resource yourself, all the knowledge and experience you have, what are some ways people can get in contact with you if they want to hear more or do more with your business?
Yeah, so I partner with Nate. He does the Doctors and Dollars podcast. So I put a ton of content out on that podcast. And we have a 5-day challenge there, which basically takes some specifics of the episodes that I did with him. We did a Physicians Financial Summit, but really it breaks down, you know, basically in 5 hours, kind of all the content and knowledge that we share, tries to make it very efficient and specific. So that's probably the best way if you just want kind of like get in my brain in the most efficient way and just give me 5 hours of the most impactful content. That 5-day challenge that we do over there is probably the best. And then our company is Grand Vision for the family office. So grandvision.co. But that talks about our fund, where we invest. It talks about the family office, kind of the whole background of what we do and how we actually work with people to guide them and help them along this path is at Grand Vision. So
for sure. And for any of that content, guys, we'll link that down below if you want to learn more. But dude, Mike, it's been a great episode, man. We've loved having you on. A ton learned from today and a ton of experience that we got to reflect on. And I hope for more for the future. But man, for now, we appreciate your time and look forward to our future conversations.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me.